The morning air was cold and a mist rolled across the valley floor. Daniel walked slowly beside Lyra, his cane pressing into the damp ground. His leg was healing, though still weak. Every step was effort, but he no longer felt alone in the struggle. Lyra walked ahead, steady as always, her long blade across her back. She never spoke much, but Daniel noticed how she sometimes looked back to check if he was keeping up. She never admitted it, but he knew she cared. The mountains were closer now, their peaks dark and sharp against the sky. Somewhere in those cliffs was the signal beacon, their only hope of reaching someone beyond this world. The ambush by midday, they crossed a narrow path between rocks. The silence felt heavy, too heavy. Lyra slowed, her eyes scanning the shadows. Daniel noticed the change in her steps. "What is it?" he whispered. "Something is wrong," she replied, her hand moving to her sword. Before he could react, figures dropped from the cliffs above. 5 warriors in the same kind of armor as Lyra surrounded them. Their blades gleamed in the sunlight and their glowing eyes locked on Daniel. "Traitor," one of them hissed at Lyra. "You walk with the off-worlder." Lyra stood tall, her face calm. "He is under my watch. You dishonor your clan," another spat. "You protect prey instead of killing it." Daniel's heart pounded. He tightened his grip on his cane, though it felt useless against trained warriors. He glanced at Lyra, who did not move. Her calm was like stone, but he could see tension in her stance. "He is mine to judge," she said firmly. The leader stepped forward. "Then both of you will die." Daniel's courage, the warriors attacked with speed. Lyra blocked the first strike, her blade clashing with theirs in a storm of sparks. Daniel stumbled back, trying to stay out of the fight, but one of the warriors turned on him. The alien's sword lifted high, ready to strike him down. Instinct kicked in. Daniel ducked, swinging his cane hard into the warrior's leg. It wasn't much, but it threw the fighter off balance. "Not today," Daniel shouted, his voice shaking but determined. The warrior growled and struck again, but Daniel rolled aside, grabbing a broken rock and slamming it into the alien's helmet. Pain shot through his arms, but the blow distracted his attacker long enough for Lyra to slash across his chest, dropping him to the ground. Daniel gasped for air, his heart racing. He had never felt so close to death, but something inside him burned, something fierce. Lyra fought like fire, her blade moving faster than his eyes could follow. She struck, blocked, twisted, and cut, her movements both graceful and deadly. Yet the fight was not easy. She bled from a wound on her arm, and the odds were heavy. Seeing her stumble, Daniel grabbed another stone and threw it at a warrior's head. The hit did little damage, but it gave Lyra an opening. She finished the fight with a roar, cutting down the last of her enemies. The valley fell silent. After the battle, Daniel leaned against the rocks, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face. His arms ached and his leg throbbed, but he was alive. Lyra stood over the fallen warriors, her blade dripping with their blood. Her chest rose and fell heavily, her silver skin glistening with sweat. She turned to Daniel, eyes sharp. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she walked over and grabbed his arm, pulling him up. "You are reckless," she said firmly. Daniel gave a weak smile. "You're welcome." Her expression softened, though she tried to hide it. She looked at him for a long moment, then finally said, "You are brave." Daniel laughed tiredly. That sounded almost like a compliment. Lyra turned away, hiding the small flicker of emotion on her face. Wounded Care, they found shelter in another cave that night. Lyra sat against the wall, her arm bleeding from the fight. Daniel noticed immediately. "You're hurt," he said. "It is nothing," she replied, her voice steady, though her wound was deep. "Nothing, huh? Well, let me see it anyway." She started to refuse, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. Reluctantly, she let him take her arm. Daniel tore a strip of cloth from his shirt and began cleaning the wound. His hands were gentle, careful. He worked slowly, tying the cloth tight enough to stop the bleeding, but soft enough not to cause more pain. Lyra watched him in silence. No one had ever touched her with such care. Her people treated wounds like tools, fix it and move on. But this human, he looked at her as if she mattered more than just survival. "Better," Daniel said finally, sitting back. "At least you won't bleed out on me." She kept her gaze on him, her chest tightening with an emotion she did not understand. The breakthrough later. As the fire burned low, Lyra handed him a small flask of water. He drank deeply, the cool liquid easing his dry throat. He looked at her and smiled softly. "Thanks, love," he said without thinking. The word slipped out naturally, warm and casual. But the effect on Lyra was not small. She froze. Her eyes widened slightly and her body went still like a statue. The word echoed in her mind. Love. No one had ever called her that. Not once in her entire life. Among her people, such words did not exist. They spoke of honor, duty, battle, but never of affection. Never of tenderness. Her chest tightened. Her breath caught. She looked at Daniel, who sipped calmly, not realizing what he had just done. He noticed her silence and raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her throat felt tight. Finally, she turned away, hiding her face in the shadows of the cave. "Nothing," she said quietly, but inside her heart raced. A new feeling that night. Lyra could not sleep. She sat awake, staring at the fire, the words circling in her mind. Love. It was not weakness, she realized. It was not shame. When Daniel said it, his voice was soft but strong, carrying a warmth she had never known, and it made her feel alive. She touched the little wooden bird he had given her earlier, holding it close. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps there was more to life than duty, more than fighting, more than surviving. Daniel stirred in his sleep, mumbling softly. Unaware of the storm he had set in her heart, Lyra closed her eyes and whispered the word to herself. Love. Her voice was so soft it was almost lost to the crackling fire. But in that moment, the warrior who had never been touched by affection began to change. The journey continues. When dawn came, Daniel stretched and grinned. Morning, warrior. Ready to climb a mountain today? Lyra looked at him, her expression calm but her heart still unsettled. She nodded once. Yes, she said, but inside, she was no longer the same. The human had given her something no one else had ever dared. A new word, a new feeling, a new light. And she carried it with her as they walked together toward the mountains side by side. The sun rose slowly over the alien world, painting the sky with shades of silver and violet. Daniel opened his eyes to the strange light and groaned softly. His body still ached from the crash, but at least he was alive. The fire from last night had burned down to ashes. Across the cave, Lyra was already awake. She sat with her blade across her knees, sharpening it with careful strokes. Her armor reflected the morning glow, and her eyes flickered toward him as he stirred. You survived the night, she said in her calm, deep voice. Daniel pushed himself up, wincing at his sore leg. That's one way to say good morning. Lyra tilted her head slightly, not sure what he meant. She didn't reply, but her sharp gaze followed his movements as he stretched and tested his injured leg. The journey begins. Where are we headed? Daniel asked, breaking the silence. Lyra stood and pointed toward the distant mountains, their peaks hidden by clouds. There is a signal tower. If we reach it, someone will hear. Maybe your people. Maybe mine. Daniel nodded. Good enough for me. Lead the way, warrior. She gave him a quick glance but said nothing. He leaned on a broken metal rod he had taken from the wreck, using it as a makeshift cane, and followed her out of the cave. The land stretched wide and empty. Strange trees with twisted trunks lined the rocky hills, their leaves glowing faintly in the sunlight. Alien birds circled in the sky, their wings beating with an eerie hum. Daniel limped along, his breath heavy. Each step was hard, but he refused to slow down. Lyra walked ahead, her pace steady, her posture upright, as if the world itself could never bend her. After a while, Daniel spoke again. So, do you always wander around saving strangers from the sky? I did not save you, Lyra answered. You live because you fight to live, Daniel chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Her eyes narrowed, but once again she said nothing. A test of strength. By midday, the ground shook. From behind the trees, a beast stepped out. It was massive, with 6 legs, a long tail, and teeth as sharp as blades. Its skin was dark and scaled, glowing faintly in the light. Daniel froze. That's bigger than any animal manual prepared me for. The creature roared, shaking the ground. Lyra drew her blade instantly, stepping in front of Daniel. Stay back, she ordered. The beast lunged, claws tearing into the dirt. Lyra met it head-on, moving fast, her sword flashing as she struck. The clash echoed through the valley. Daniel stumbled back, watching in awe. She fought like a storm, every move precise, her armor shining as she blocked and struck again. But the beast was strong, too strong. It knocked her aside with its tail, sending her crashing into the rocks. She hit the ground hard, groaning as she tried to stand. Without thinking, Daniel ran forward. His heart pounded, fear racing through him, but he couldn't just watch. He grabbed a broken piece of metal from the wreckage earlier and shouted, waving it to draw the beast's attention. "Hey, over here!" he yelled. The creature turned toward him, eyes glowing, teeth bared. Daniel's legs shook, but he didn't back down. As it lunged, he rolled to the side, stabbing the metal rod into its softer underbelly. The beast roared in pain, thrashing violently. Lyra, seizing the chance, leapt forward and drove her blade deep into its chest. With one final scream, the creature collapsed, shaking the ground as it fell lifeless. Breathing hard, Daniel pulled himself up. His hands trembled and sweat covered his face. Lyra wiped her blade, standing tall. She looked at him with something new in her eyes, something almost like respect. "You fought," she said slowly. Daniel smirked weakly. "I'm not built for running, so I figured stabbing would do." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Lyra nodded once. "Perhaps you are not as weak as you look." Daniel chuckled. "I'll take that as another compliment." Around the fire that night, they made camp beneath the glowing trees. The air was cool and the stars shone brighter than Daniel had ever seen. Lyra sat quietly watching the flames. Daniel sat across from her, tired but unable to sleep. He broke the silence with a story. "Back home," he began, "we have places where families sit around a fire like this. They share stories, laugh, eat together. It makes the night feel less empty." Lyra tilted her head. "Families?" "Yeah," Daniel said, his eyes softening. "Mothers, fathers, children. People you care about. People who care about you. They keep you going." Lyra's face stayed calm, but inside her heart stirred. Her people had no such warmth. Families in her world were duty, not love. Warriors were raised to fight, not to feel. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Do you have family?" Daniel's smile faded a little. "I did. They're far away now." "Too far." The fire cracked between them. Lyra didn't speak, but something inside her shifted. She had never heard anyone speak of family that way, like it was strength, not weakness. Daniel noticed her silence and smiled softly. "You don't talk much, do you?" "I speak when needed," she replied. He leaned back, hands behind his head. "Well, I talk too much. Maybe we balance each other out." For the first time, Lyra almost smiled, but she hid it quickly, turning her gaze back to the fire. Trust grows slowly over the next days. Their journey continued. Daniel struggled with his injured leg, but he never complained. Lyra sometimes slowed her pace, though she never admitted it was for him. They faced storms that shook the ground, rivers that glowed with strange light, and more beasts that lurked in the shadows. Each time they worked together, her strength and his clever thinking keeping them alive. When Lyra hunted, Daniel used scraps from the ship to build traps that made her work easier. When Daniel's leg gave out, Lyra carried him without a word. At night, he told more stories of Earth, stories of music, of laughter, of small things that made life feel human. Lyra listened in silence, but every word left a mark on her. One evening, as they sat near another campfire, Daniel handed her a piece of wood he had carved with his knife. It was rough, shaped into a small bird. "It's not much," he said, "but back home people give gifts. It means you matter to them." Lyra stared at the little carving in her hand. No one had ever given her something that wasn't duty or command. She held it carefully, almost afraid it might break. She didn't know how to answer, so she simply placed the carving beside her heart, where her armor was strongest. Daniel smiled. "Good enough." The bond strengthens. By the end of their second week, something had changed. They no longer walked as strangers, but as partners. Daniel trusted her to protect him, and she trusted him to watch her back in ways she never expected. One night, as the fire burned low, Daniel looked at her and said softly, "You know, I think I'd be dead without you." Lyra turned her gaze toward him. "And I without you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, but it was no longer an empty silence. It was filled with something unspoken, fragile, and real. The human and the warrior sat beneath the alien stars side by side. Neither said the word, but both felt it. They were no longer just survivors. They were becoming something more. The final stretch to the signal tower was the hardest. Jagged rocks tore at their boots and thin paths clung to the cliffs like threads. The wind howled around them, carrying the scent of rain and danger. Daniel leaned on his cane, struggling, but his determination burned brighter than his pain. Lyra moved beside him, her long strides effortless, her blade ready for anything. But her mind was not only on the climb, it was on him. The word he had spoken the night before echoed in her mind. Love. She could no longer deny it. Every choice she had made, every instinct to protect, to fight, to survive, had led to this moment. She realized she did care, deeply, without restraint, for the human at her side. The signal tower at last. The tower loomed above them, shining like silver against the dark mountains. Its base was guarded by a force of alien warriors, dozens of them armed and alert. Daniel froze. "We're outnumbered, aren't we?" Lyra shook her head, her eyes calm but sharp. "Numbers do not decide battles. Strategy and courage do, and you have both." He looked at her, admiration and trust written in his expression. "Then I'm ready to follow you anywhere." Her heart skipped. She had never expected to feel this way, trusting someone not only with her life, but with her heart. "Stay close," she said, gripping her blade. Together they moved forward, weaving through shadows, climbing rocks, and using every trick Daniel had learned from his human training. Lyra fought silently, swiftly, disabling guards with precision. Daniel supported her, distracting enemies, creating openings, and using clever tools he had scavenged. They worked together as a team, her strength and skill, his cunning and heart, beating the odds at every step. The betrayal as they neared the tower entrance, the largest guard stepped forward. His eyes glowed red and his voice was like steel. "You cannot enter," he said. "Leave now or die." Lyra stepped forward. "You will not harm him," the guard laughed. "Your loyalty is to your clan, yet you protect a human. You will face punishment." Daniel stepped beside her. "We don't care about punishment. We care about living and reaching that tower." The guard lunged. Lyra and Daniel moved as one. Lyra's blade struck first, deflecting the enemy's attack. Daniel, though weaker, used every ounce of courage and cleverness to block, dodge, and strike with improvised tools. The fight was fierce. Lyra was wounded, but she moved with grace and precision, covering Daniel whenever he faltered. And Daniel? Daniel fought with something more than strength. He fought with heart. Every time the guard advanced, he stood firm, protecting Lyra, showing a bravery that shocked even her. By the end of the battle, the enemies lay defeated. Daniel panted, bruised and bleeding, but alive. Lyra stood beside him, her chest rising and falling as she surveyed the scene. She looked at him, and for the first time words failed her. The moment they entered the signal tower. Its interior was dark, humming with power. Daniel approached the control panel, his fingers moving quickly, repairing connections, reactivating systems. Lyra stayed close, still cautious, still aware of potential danger, but her thoughts kept drifting to him. "Almost done," Daniel said. "Just a few more adjustments." Lyra handed him tools, careful and precise. Their hands brushed, and a warmth passed between them. Daniel smiled softly. "You know, I never imagined someone like you would trust me so much." "You are different," she admitted quietly. "Different from anyone I have ever known." Daniel paused. "I've said it before, but it's true. I care about you, Lyra, more than I've ever cared about anyone." Her chest tightened. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering faintly in the tower's glow. I care for you as well," she whispered. The word again. Daniel's heart skipped. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Then let me say it again," he said softly. "Thanks, love." This time Lyra did not freeze. She did not pull away. Instead, she looked at him, and the walls she had built for years crumbled. The word, simple, human, warm, felt like a key turning in her chest. "Love," she repeated, her voice stronger this time. I am yours." Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of their journey lift. He pulled her into a careful embrace, holding her close. She rested her head against his chest, her blade still at her side but her heart unguarded. For the first time, the warrior who had faced countless battles felt safe, cared for, and truly alive. The signal sent Daniel activated the tower. A beam of light shot into the sky, sending a signal to his home world. Soon ships would arrive to rescue them. But for now, in the silence of the tower, only the two of them mattered. "You have changed me," Lyra admitted. "I never believed words could mean this much." "You changed me too," Daniel said. "I never thought I could trust anyone like this." especially a warrior. They laughed softly, the sound mingling with the hum of the tower. Two hearts forged in battle, fear and courage finally finding each other. A new beginning. When the rescue ships arrived, Daniel and Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out at the horizon. Their world had been dangerous, strange, and unforgiving, but they had survived together. Lyra took Daniel's hand, squeezing it gently. I thought duty was all I had. But now I see, life can be more. Daniel smiled, brushing a strand of her dark hair from her face. And love can be stronger than any battle. She nodded, a small smile on her lips. Then let us face the future together. As the ships descended, carrying them back to safety, Daniel whispered once more, "Thanks, love." And this time, Lyra did not freeze. She smiled fully, her heart open, and said softly, "You are welcome. Mine." Together they stepped forward side by side, ready for whatever new adventures awaited, stronger, braver, and bound by something more powerful than fear or duty, love. The night sky above the alien world was broken with streaks of fire. A human ship had entered the planet's atmosphere too fast, too low, and now it was falling apart like burning paper in the wind. Inside the wreckage, Daniel held onto the straps of his seat. The alarm screamed in his ears, red lights flashing against his pale face. The last thing he remembered before the crash was whispering to himself, "Hold on. Just hold on." When he woke, he was lying in the dirt, smoke rising from twisted metal around him. His head pounded, but he was alive. The ship was gone, shattered across the rocky ground, but somehow he had survived. The air was different here, heavy and sharp in his lungs. He coughed and tried to stand, but his leg burned with pain. He limped forward, searching for water, for food, for something to tell him he wasn't completely doomed. The land stretched endlessly. Dark hills, strange trees with silver leaves, and creatures that made noises he had never heard before. His survival training echoed in his mind. Move slow, stay calm, find shelter. He didn't know someone was already watching him. Far above, on a cliff, stood Lyra. She was not human. Her tall figure was wrapped in armor that shimmered like the night. In her hand she carried a long blade carved from crystal steel. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, sharp and watchful. She had seen the fire in the sky. To her people, falling stars often meant danger or opportunity. When the human ship broke apart, she followed the smoke and found the survivor. Lyra was a warrior of her clan, trained from childhood to fight, defend, and obey. She had seen many things fall from the heavens before, but never had she seen a creature like this man. His face was uncovered, his clothes torn, his body weak compared to her kind, and yet he stood limping, refusing to fall. Curiosity pulled her closer. She moved silently down the rocks, each step light until she was close enough to hear him breathe. Daniel stopped near a broken piece of his ship, leaning against it. His chest rose and fell quickly. He whispered half to himself, "Great, stranded, just what I needed." That was when he heard movement. He spun, heart racing, and saw her. A tall figure stepped out of the shadows, armor catching the moonlight. Her eyes burned like twin stars, and the blade in her hand was longer than his arm. Daniel froze. His mind screamed danger, but his body was too tired to run. Lyra studied him. His eyes were wide, his face pale, but he did not scream. He did not beg. Instead, he lifted one hand slowly, like a man who knew he could not win but refused to fall without dignity. "I don't want trouble," Daniel said, voice low. "If you're going to kill me, just make it quick." Lyra tilted her head. His words were strange, but his tone carried no fear. Most creatures begged. Most trembled. This one did not. "You are not from this world," she said at last. Her voice was deep, steady, almost metallic. Daniel blinked. She spoke his language, or something close to it. "Yeah," he answered. "Ship crashed. I'm stuck here." She narrowed her eyes. "Weak, injured, you will not live long." Daniel let out a tired laugh. "Tell me something I don't know." For a moment, the warrior's face did not change. Then slowly she lowered her blade. They walked together through the strange land. At first, Lyra kept her distance, her eyes never leaving him. Daniel tried to keep up, though every step sent pain through his leg. "Why are you helping me?" he asked finally. "I am not helping," she answered. "I am watching. If you die, I will leave you. If you live, Perhaps you are worth more. Comforting, Daniel muttered under his breath. Lyra didn't understand his humor, but she noticed the small smile on his lips despite his pain. That puzzled her. Her people did not smile in the face of danger. They found a small cave at the base of a cliff. Lyra inspected it quickly, then motioned for him to enter. Daniel sat heavily against the wall, breathing hard. The warrior lit a small flame with the device at her belt. The fire cast shadows across the stone, dancing on their faces. For the first time, Daniel saw her clearly. Her skin had a faint silver hue like polished stone. Her hair was dark and braided tightly against her head. Her armor looked worn but strong, covered in scratches that told stories of battles fought long ago. She looked powerful, untouchable. Yet her eyes, glowing faintly, held something else. Something he could not name. Hours passed in silence. Daniel tried to rest, but his stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since the crash, Lyra noticed. Without a word, she left the cave and returned with something wrapped in leaves. She tossed it toward him. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "Food," she said simply. He unwrapped it, finding strips of dried meat. It smelled strange, but he was too hungry to argue. He took a bite, chewed slowly, then nodded. "Not bad, thanks." Lyra stared at him. His voice was soft, gentle. No one had ever said thanks to her before. In her world, giving food was duty, not kindness. She didn't reply, only turned away. But inside, something shifted, something small and quiet. That night, as Daniel lay on the stone floor, he couldn't stop thinking. She could have killed me. Easily. But she didn't. Why? He looked at her. She sat near the fire, blade across her lap, eyes sharp even as she rested. She was a warrior, no doubt. Everything about her screamed danger. But there was something else, something lonely in the way she kept herself apart, in the silence that wrapped around her. Daniel smiled faintly to himself. Guess I'm not alone after all. He didn't know if she heard him, but for the first time since the crash, he felt a flicker of hope. By morning, the bond between them had begun. Though neither would admit it, Lyra saw a human who should have died, yet still walked. Daniel saw a warrior who should have been his enemy, yet still stayed. The journey ahead would test them both. But in that cave under the pale alien sun, the first thread of connection was woven. Quiet, fragile, and stronger than either of them understood. The sun was high in the alien sky, scattering light across the jagged cliffs and silver trees. Daniel and Lyra continued their climb toward the mountains, the path narrow and treacherous. Daniel limped using his cane while Lyra moved effortlessly, her blade strapped across her back. The events of the previous battle lingered in their minds. Daniel's courage had impressed her, but it was the word he had spoken, love, that lingered in Lyra's heart. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the path ahead, but the memory refused to leave her. Lyra's struggle as they rested beside a stream. Daniel drank deeply while Lyra sat quietly, her silver skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. "You've been quiet today," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "I am focused," she replied curtly. Daniel smiled. "Focused or thinking about what I said?" Lyra stiffened. He had noticed. She looked away, scanning the cliffs as though the world outside could hide her inner thoughts. "You speak strangely," she said at last. "Why do you call me that word?" Daniel tilted his head. "Love? It's just what it means. Someone you care about, someone you trust, someone you want to be close to." Lyra's chest tightened. "Close, trust, feelings. These words are meaningless to my people. They're real to me," Daniel said softly, looking at her. "And I care about you, Lyra. You've saved me more times than I can count. You're not just a warrior. You're someone I want to know." Her hand tightened around her sword. She had never been called such words before, and it made her uneasy, exposed. But a small part of her wanted to believe him. An unexpected storm by midday, dark clouds rolled across the sky. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and danger. Lyra scanned the horizon and spotted the approach of a violent storm. The winds could sweep them off the cliffs, and the rain would make the paths impossible to climb. "We must find shelter," Lyra said, her voice commanding. Daniel followed, trusting her judgment. They found a rocky overhang and huddled together beneath it. Lyra's armor shielded them from the heaviest rain, but neither spoke. As the storm raged around them, Daniel reached out, covering her hand with his. "We'll make it," he said quietly. Lyra froze at the contact. No one had ever touched her in such a gentle way. The warmth of his hand and the quiet assurance in his voice sent a strange feeling through her, an unfamiliar mix of comfort and strength. For a moment, she wanted to pull away, to remain the stoic warrior she had always been, but she didn't. She held his hand, letting the warmth seep into her, even if only for a moment, a lesson in strength. The storm passed by nightfall, leaving behind a world sparkling with raindrops. They continued their climb, reaching a narrow ledge overlooking a deep canyon. Daniel hesitated. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. Lyra looked at him, her eyes sharp. "You have already survived more than you think. Courage is not the absence of fear, human. It is the choice to act despite it." Daniel swallowed, taking in her words. "And you? You're always so brave." "I have no choice," she replied. But inside, she felt the truth of his courage as more than just survival. It was bravery born of care, of protection, of love. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. She followed, moving beside him. For the first time, they crossed a dangerous ledge together, not just as warrior and human, but as partners. The signal tower in sight by dawn, the distant mountains loomed close. Between the peaks, a tall, thin structure glinted in the sunlight, metal and crystal combined in a tower that reached for the sky. Daniel's heart leapt. That's it. The signal tower. Finally. Lyra did not celebrate, but she nodded. The climb would still be dangerous. She scanned the terrain carefully, watching for hidden threats. As they approached the base, a group of alien scouts emerged from the shadows. Their eyes glowed and weapons were ready. Daniel froze, thinking they would be attacked again, but Lyra stepped forward. "You will not touch him," she said. Her voice was calm yet powerful. The aliens hesitated. They had fought Lyra before and knew her skill. They backed away slowly, disappearing into the mist. Daniel exhaled. "You just scare them with words now?" he asked with a weak laugh. "Sometimes," she said quietly. "Words and steel together are stronger than either alone." Daniel smiled, seeing her in a new light. She was more than a warrior. She was a protector, a guide, a partner, and perhaps something more. A moment of care that night. As they made camp near the tower, Daniel noticed Lyra moving slower than usual. She was tired and her armor had scratches from the climb. "You need rest," he said, handing her some water. "I am fine," she replied. "Fine is not enough," he said. "Let me help you." At first she resisted, but he gently removed her armor piece by piece, treating each with respect. He cleaned the scratches and bruises, using his hands to soothe her. Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest, comfort, trust, something she had never experienced before. When he handed her a small cloth to wipe her face, she looked at him. Her eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed a small, quiet smile to form. "You care for me," she said, almost a whisper. "Of course," Daniel said softly. "And I always will." Her heart raced at his words. She did not understand how someone could be so gentle and strong at the same time. Her warrior mind knew to fight to survive, but this human had shown her a new kind of power. The word revisited. That night, Daniel spoke quietly as they lay near the fire. "You know, it's funny. I never thought I'd survive a crash on a strange world, and yet, here I am alive because of you." Lyra shifted slightly. "You survived because you did not give up." "I survived because you saved me," he replied softly. Then, almost without thinking, he said the words again. "Thanks, love." Lyra froze completely this time. Her silver eyes widened and she could not move. Her heart pounded. That word, spoken again so naturally, resonated deep within her. No one had ever called her that. No one had ever shown her this kind of warmth. It was terrifying and wonderful. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Love." The decision by morning, Lyra had made a choice. She would no longer ignore the feelings Daniel had stirred in her. Duty and honor were still important, but she realized there was more to life than fighting and obedience. Daniel woke to find her standing near the cliffs, gazing at the sunrise. "Thinking?" he asked softly. She looked at him, her eyes clear and strong. "Yes," she said. "I have learned something. Love does not weaken a warrior. It makes them stronger." Daniel's heart leapt. Then we are both stronger together, she nodded. We face the tower together, and whatever comes next. Together, side by side, they prepared to climb the final stretch to the signal tower. Each step was a test, not just of skill and courage, but of trust, of partnership, and of a bond that had begun in fire and fear, and now grew in care and love. The world around them was still dangerous, full of unknown threats, but Daniel and Lyra no longer faced it alone. They had found something more powerful than fear or death. They had found each other,